Hello, we have got our final speaker for today, Michael Tam. Michael is the Global Design Director at IBM iX, the experience design consulting arm of IBM. Michael helps enterprise clients place human at the center of why and how their business should think, act, and innovate. Michael is based in Hong Kong, but has spent half of his life living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Please help me give a warm welcome to Michael.
Kia ora, New Zealand. I'm really happy to be here today with you all to share a topic that is close to my heart, which is conditions design. But before I go deep into the topic that I'm going to talk about in the next 25 minutes, I want to say how I've been blown away by the kind of content, the kind of learning sharing by the various speakers on this day one of the conference. We have everything from the UX research at the front line to object-oriented UX to research ops to the new approach to information architecture, right? All of these different topics really, I think is going to be really valuable and relevant to no matter you're a design leader or designer at the earlier stage of your career, that you can bring it back to your company, to your organization, to continuously to deliver value to your company through the means of design. And I'm really glad that my session, my talk, is at this very end of the of day one, because as I was listening through the different speakers and the topics and the materials, I thought, hey, this is just great because I think conditions design as a topic hopefully it will give you an opportunity to reflect, but also to draw in the different threads of materials that you heard throughout today, and find a thing. Hopefully, this topic will help you to find a bit of a recap, give you a chance to recap and find a single narrative, and hopefully the topic of conditions design you'll find it valuable to your job. But just set your expectation. Condition design is, if you look on Google, there's no definition for it, and I'm by no means an expert in that, but it is something that is related to how I practice design in day-to-day life at and especially at IBM when we deal with a lot of complex enterprise service design problems. So so hopefully you'll find it valuable, no matter what stage of you are at your design career. Okay, so before I move on, let me quickly share my screen so that we have something to look at while we talk. Okay, conditions design. This is my talk about weaving the invisible threads of service design, value orchestration, and culture building. But first, let's talk about, let me give you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my background. I am Michael Tam. I'm a Hong Konger and a Kiwi. I was born in Hong Kong, and then I lived about 15, 16 years in New Zealand, right here in Wellington. So first, I'm very glad to be back here in town, in Welly. But at the same time, I'm very glad to be connecting with the rest of you in New Zealand, APAC, and of course, the rest of the world as well. I am a storyteller for brands, and I'm also a designer in UX design, service design, business design, and increasingly education design. The first part of my career, I was a creative director, art director in the advertising industry, and which I help brands to craft the experience with, to connect the brands with their audience. And later on, I pivot towards UX design. So in the last 5-6 years, I was working in this space, but because of my work with IBM, my role evolved from purely on UX UI design to more complex service design, increasingly strategic business design, and outside of work, like I mentioned, I also do a lot of education design as well. So at IBM, I am a global design director, part of the IBM iX, which is the experience design consulting arm of IBM. We help Fortune 500 enterprises to transform their business, transform how they operate, how do they leverage emerging technology to augment the way that human and machine interact, so that they are ready for the future. And apart from that, I also have other role and responsibilities. I'm a mentor and an advisor at the ADPlist.org, which is a nonprofit organization aimed to democratize mentorship, democratize learning for make it accessible to everyone in the world. I'm also an instructor, education designer at Happier, which is a career knowledge platform in Hong Kong. And increasingly, I have an interest in the metaverse and extended reality. So I'm also has been an advisor at the AR/VR Association in Hong Kong, but which is not the topic I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about conditions design. So what is this? Well, if you let's use UX New Zealand conference as an example. We all know what happened the last week or two, right? For a while, we were very excited, especially for myself, who just came back in town, connected with, by chance, connected with the organizing team of UX New Zealand, the organizing team at October Workshop. And I was very excited because I was looking forward to be in this in-person conference with 300 of you to interact physically, right? But unfortunately, the traffic light system tells us that right now it's the red light phase, which means we can't go on with an in-person conference with 300 of us crowded in a small space, right? So I was very disappointed that happened, and the organizing team at one stage offered to comfort me to offer that maybe we could do a mini meetup in Wellington while I'm in town. But at the same time, the main thing is about the big conference, and finally, with all this ups and downs, and at the end, we completely pivot towards the fully virtual conference. So hats off to Sarah and the organizing team of UX New Zealand. But at the same time, I think if you think about it, there's so many during such a unpredictable time of our lives. During COVID, there's a lot of variables. People, the process, the environment, all of this contribute to the fact that UX New Zealand organizers just cannot fully control how the conference is going to be, but they have set up the conditions in a way that they could successfully pivot whenever the challenges arise, and then they could pivot in order to deliver the same outcome, the same intentional outcome, which is to bring knowledge and interactions to this community in New Zealand APAC, so that we can still share our knowledge. So in a nutshell, this is what conditions design is all about. How can we manage all these ever-changing variables so that we can still arrive in at the intentional outcome that we hope to achieve? Like I mentioned, there's no definitive definition of what conditions design is. If you go on Google, I think the first result and the most result is actually related to something to do with the sewage system, the water drainage system. So, which is really weird, I guess, designing the condition of your house or something, right? But if you come to think about the day-to-day job of a designer, we are increasingly having to deal with, we have to design and influence to deal with these intangible variables, sometimes tangible, but most of the time they are intangible, but at the same time, they are very uncontrollable as well. So we can only design these variables, design the conditions so that would allow an intentional outcome to be achieved. Designing or influencing intangible variables that would allow an intentional outcome to be achieved. I sort of deliberately written this articulation, this statement in a relatively passive way, allow to be achieved. Because I think as designers, increasingly also as a design facilitator, you will realize, because we're dealing with all these variables that which are not in our control, we have to take a bit of a back seat sometimes. Which is the true nature of conditions design. How can we design the condition, design the environment for these outcomes to come to life, without us actually sometimes being able to handhold or directly influence these variables. We're in New Zealand, which is a sporty country, so I will use a sport analogy to talk about that particular part of nature of conditions design. And for fans of the English Premier League, I guess you will be able to guess my favorite team is Manchester United, which is a bit of an irony right here, using it as an example, because they ain't doing really well. So I can arguably say they did not design the conditions for success. They did not design that well. So, but if you just step back a little bit from Manchester United, well, this is a reminder for myself. Let's think about sports, right? You have the players and the coach. The players are the ones who can normally have a much more direct impact on the outcome of a match. But a coach cannot. The coach can't get into the field, they can't get on the pitch to play. They can only set up the team, set up the structure, set up the formation, have all the strategy to influence the outcome. Think about it, that the role of a coach is similar to what, if you are a conditions designer, you can only design the conditions for your team to succeed. You can only condition your players to do a certain things, but they are still going to, they are the ones who's going on the pitch. Your stakeholder is going to be on the pitch. Your user is going to be on the pitch. They're going to do something that might be out of your control. So how can we design our conditions the best that we could to allow us to achieve a certain intangible outcome? That is conditions design. Another example, which is what I love when I arrive back to Wellington. This is the waterfront of Wellington Harbour. The name of it is the Commonwealth Walkway. It was a beautiful walk if you go by the harbour front on a sunny day, on a beautiful day in Wellington. What I love about this is people love to do this for the last 20, 30 years already. God knows, maybe even longer. They love on a good day by the harbour side, take a dip. They take a little jump, do a little dive into the sea. But what amazed me is every time I walk past there is I've been impressed by how the city council approached this, because it's fun, isn't it? Because they actually did a big renovation all around the harbour front, and it's beautiful right now to walk around it. But unlike a lot of other councils or countries in the world, which I have to say, I live a long time in Hong Kong. I came from Hong Kong. Give the same project to Hong Kong, they probably won't do the same thing, because you see what they did here. They said they understand, they value the behavior of the users, of the citizens. They know they love to do this. They love to have a bit of fun by the harbour side. So they actually design and install a platform for them to jump off. They design a platform that basically allow all the citizens to interact, to have fun with each other. These are quite likely strangers as well. And if you see the video pan to the right side a little bit later, you see this building right here is an emergency station. And right next to it, there's actually a little shower pole as well. So after you take a dip, after you take a dive, you climb back up and you can take a shower to rinse off all the seawater, right? So how can we design to influence human behavior? Instead of interrupting them, instead of completely changing it, recognize the human behavior, but at the same time, if we want to move them, nudge them along the way, this is what conditions design is all about. How can you design the condition to keep, in this particular case, keep people safe, right? Instead of stopping them to do something that they love to do, put an emergency safety station right next to it. So that's how how the city council approached this particular design challenge. Again, impressive and fun. So I talk a lot about whenever we talk about conditions design, there's a lot to do with dealing with the different variables, the intangible variables that is all very often out of our control, and you can categorize them into three kinds: people, processes, and systems. Take the example of the harbor front. Obviously, people is the biggest variables because there's people from all walks of life. You can people from different age groups, and then of course everyone have their own sort of process approach to take a dip, right? And then how about the system? Thinking about the wider area of that particular waterfront area. How far are the emergency surface are, right? What about the toilets or where people can rinse, right? How can they design and put all of these variables in a way, line up all your ducks so that they actually deliver something something of a good, some sort of a good experience is the challenge. And if you think about these variables and translate it to your day-to-day life, a day-to-day job, is increasingly which is increasingly more complex, and is something that especially in a lot of big organization is looking to deal with, and which kind of spawn into all of these new areas of opportunities for enterprise and organization to look into, like talent and change management, which is related to people. How do you design the experience of your people, your employees, right? Let alone your users. And the process, increasingly designers have to help redesign the process as we augmented these process with new technology. How do we facilitate when the process change because of the people change, people's capability change, and the technology change. And then, of course, I'll talk about technology. There's the new disruptive technology come into play. I'm not just talking about metaverse, but your day-to-day traditional like banking system, your health systems. They are all disrupted by technology as well. So how can we all deal with all these variables in order to create business value led by design is the biggest topic and challenge that is going to face us as designer in the next, God knows, 2, 5, 10 years or more. And underneath all these intangible, uncontrollable variables, that's where complexity and the lack of clarity gonna be the biggest challenge for us all, because with these in place, we cannot navigate to the intentional outcome that we hope to achieve. Because with complexity and lack of clarity, it's going to be pulling the legs, pulling the legs of all the design efforts that you put into place. So no matter how well your design team has been said, your design practices, your craft skills is, if you don't deal with these complexity and lack of clarity issues, we will not be able to achieve the outcomes that we hope to achieve. So now, as you can imagine, why I said I deal with a lot of these in my day-to-day life, because at IBM we help traditional big enterprise to transform, and increasingly that's something that we do in the area of service design, value orchestration, and culture building for our clients. We have an approach called IBM Garage, which I'm going to touch on to them a little bit later. But I just want to use this IBM Garage approach and as an example, or to to give you a sense of how do we deal with all those variables? How do we put some sort of framework, some sort of approach together so that we can navigate through the complexity and the lack of clarity for our clients. The example I'm going to give here is just to set the context and give a sort of umbrella example, which is a project we call Lates under PepsiCo, the brand. So Lates as a brand, we built a garage project around it. And in this garage project, just to give you some context, is that it has 300 people in an agile release train. This innovation project that has been carried out by Lates and PepsiCo has been going on for 10 years. IBM has been involved with them in the last 3 years, and we were involved with so many different sort of redesign as well. Process. We need to redesign the frontline retail service scheduling process. So, imagine these chips, so sitting nicely on a shelf front in Walmart, in 7-Eleven, in Park and Save. But who's going to service them? There's millions of, tens of thousands of people as part of the frontline servicing team who will need to be, who work to a tight schedule, take these chips, fresh package of chips from the manufacturing plants to the all of these stores, rotate them, and there's a very complex process, complex service. And then at the same time, with all these 10 of thousands of frontline employees, how does the organization manage these labors, resources? And at the same time, how do they deal with the learning, the coaching of these employees? So there were a lot of projects and a lot of process we were working on in this garage project. And there were a lot of systems that we need to deal with. Legacy system. So all of these frontline employees, apart from taking the chips into the 7-Eleven, they also have this legacy handheld device that looks like a classic FPOS, a credit card machine. So now we need to redesign that experience and put it onto iOS system, iOS apps on the iPhones. But then, of course, also have all these other new systems that we need to connect this new platform to, like Salesforce. And then there's also dedicated website where during COVID time, you can go on a website and order snacks to you. So think about it. There's complexity, all the variables, people, process, systems that we need to deal with. So I'm using this example just to give you a sense of the complexity and the lack of clarity we need to deal with in a typical IBM Garage project. And this particular Lates one is one of the biggest one and more mature one as well. In fact, I'm not going to go deep into like exactly what we designed, and all the different projects, because it's going to take a week for me to talk about them. But using it as an example, I just want to bring out the challenge that we face as a leadership team. How do we design the conditions to combat complexity and the lack of clarity? So at the back of our mind, as the transformation team, we constantly ask ourselves, how might we design the conditions to provide governance and clarity to 300 plus people to co-create these complex services, these complex processes that would deliver business value? That has been the question that the team, the leadership team, we were tasked to deal with while delivering all that design work. So like I mentioned, I'm not going to go into the actual design output we did, but using it as to set a condition, set a context, I want to give you this 5 points of as a bit of a framework. Hopefully you can take it away to this approach. Hopefully you can take it away to apply it to your day-to-day job, no matter you work for a small, medium-sized organization or big, enterprise. traditional enterprise going for a transformation. I believe this could still be applicable or relevant to your work. So these 5 points, 5 steps, first, frameworks, which is related to a strategic level. Secondly, united fronts, which is related to our way of working. Third, numbers, how do we articulate the value of design? Fourth, facilitation, which is the how, as designer, we move things along. How do we design the conditions? Some of the watch outs we need to think about. And then last but not least is our role and responsibility as designer. How can we use this as a checklist to think about the next time when you're tasked to design something, when you realize you actually need to design the conditions for your team or for your stakeholders to behave a certain way so that you can achieve your intentional outcome. First, frameworks. Frameworks is very important. I guess I came from a consultant arm of IBM, so we always use strategic frameworks to provide clarity for stakeholders to visualize the future and the roadmap. Because if you think about, for example, the late project, so much complexity. Without some sort of frameworks to guide our stakeholders, they will not be able to see step by step what's down the road, what's the future, what's the intentional outcome we're going to achieve in 2-3 years time, let alone 10 years transformation. So just give you an example on the these kind of frameworks, you can apply different levels, different depth, different fidelity of frameworks to depending on who is your audience. On a high level, we at IBM Garage, we have this framework that we help our client to envision which stage, which phase they are at. The first phase is co-create, which is the discovery phase, where we help them to envision, to define the future. The second phase, once you define the strategy, define the roadmap, did all your research, then you bring it to co-execution, which is more of a delivery building stage where we design all the new apps or the platform, but at the same time apply research at the very center of our approach so that we iterate to our MVP. And then finally, when we have all these new design output in place, all of this system running, we think about how do we cooperate so that we help our client to scale to the market, scale up our operations, scale up our output so that you not just focus on 1 or 2 MVP, but you actually build multiple MVP that you can scale across the whole organization as well. So that's the first level, just to give the client a bit of a clear three steps of 3 phases of the approach. But what if you need to bring your client along to see a little bit more details? Well, this is another chart we have. We break it down a little bit. You can see on the top, we still say co-create, co-execute, cooperate. But we break it down for our client to see the next level of depth, which is you see all the things that we need to do throughout this every stage. As I mentioned, co-creation stage, discovery stage, we have a lot more, we have a lot of activities related to research, to define the strategy, define the business opportunity using the canvas, validate our business opportunity. But at the same time, when you can also see throughout different stage, we also have all the details to provide the clarity for our stakeholders, for our clients, to everyone on the team to know what's next, what they need to do, so that they know that future roadmap for them to have that clarity and the alignment as well. So, well, not necessarily, this is not something that's just for IBM Garage approach. I'm sure a lot of you are service designer in the audience, and I'm sure you are familiar with the service design blueprint, which is a great framework you could apply in different depth, different fidelity as well. On the high level, you can always just focus on the customer journey, customer experience, but at the same time, you can slowly build more so that you can talk about the front stage of the technology, how does it relate to the customer experience and employee experience to the backstage system, slowly build more of it so that you can create the conditions for clarity And especially using the service design blueprint, it helps you to highlight any dependency between all these different touch points, right? So again, frameworks, if you struggle to articulate your intention to your client, try to look up a framework that can help you to provide that kind of clarity so that they understand why are you doing something and all the different steps that will lead you to the outcome that you want to achieve. Second, united fronts way of working. As I mentioned, we are increasingly dealing with complex service design, complex enterprise problem. As designers, we are no longer able to just go alone. We cannot just, just pick up our laptop and heads down, just work within yourself and not having communication with other people. So remember, don't go alone. When you work as a team, work with someone else, even if even if you're not part of even if you're an individual designer, a solo designer, working with other parties, other stakeholders, without other designers involved, you should still see them as one team. Bring them along, create rituals so that you can facilitate and shape the conditions together. I think that is very, very important for us to recognize this as designers. So how can you create the conditions for clarity and knowledge growth? So this is how we do it with in our garage projects. We set out very clearly for our stakeholders to understand how much time, how often they should do a sync up with us, do a stand up with us. Different level as well. As you can see, Monday to Friday, there's 2 days dedicated for executive stand up, so they have the transparency and the clarity on the project. Interface team, so that means the team between the leadership and the working team, they are the more centralized team to help provide governance and at the same time to resolve any impediments. So they also have frequent meetings. And then of course you have the different squads who working together in a day-to-day sync up for clarity. But at the same time, very important is we build different guilds. This guild allow us to share knowledge. And that is the only way that we can ensure we're not just focusing on tuning out like a conveyor belt, delivering output, but also growing and iterating at the same time. So as you can see here, we have design guild, we're going to build development guild, we're going to have on a bigger project, we even have research guild separate out from just design guild as well. So again, all of this, next time you're in the project, make sure you build a united front with all your stakeholders. Don't go along, create rituals to bring them along the way. Third, numbers. I think increasingly designers, we need to know our numbers. We need to know how to articulate the value of designs. You need to learn numbers, be a little bit more sensitive to the numbers so that you can quantify and articulate how your design efforts is going to lead to business value. Because unless we're able to do that, your design is you will just always be perceived as an artist instead of a designer who could bring value to an organization. One thing that we do at IBM Garage is this particular artifact. It's just an Excel sheet. We call it the pain points tracker. So this is our way to create the conditions for design to be understood and appreciated. Here we map all our user research, our user goals, our user research output, the pain points, what kind of features product features going to be impacted by those pain points. We link to the business needs. We link it to the business jobs to be done. We link it to the business metrics, the KPIs right there. In this particular one, we haven't input that yet, but that is ultimately what we're going to do, to link our design output to the business value, business success, so that we can allow our stakeholders to understand where design leads, where the value of design being translated to business. The fourth, facilitation. I think that is the how for us designers to really orchestrate the value to business, because first of all, orchestrating those, the articulating the value of design to business value is challenging. It's very challenging, and it's not something, to be very honest, even as I encourage us to be better at numbers, it's still not a job. Orchestrating the value of design or orchestrating value for business is very challenging. It's not a job for just designers. So, but at the same time, you need to first bring people together, bring a business analyst together, someone who can help you to do that as well. But at the same time, it's actually challenging for the client as well. So you need to handhold your stakeholders along. You got to bring them along, use your facilitation skills so that they can understand step by step, to develop those KPIs, to develop those metrics that would link the business objective with the value of design. So make sure you have a facilitator on board. Make sure you embrace the facilitation as a very important skills for designers. So let's bring back the service design blueprint. This is, like I mentioned before, is a great framework for anyone who wants to deal with complexity. But at the same time, this is how we apply, how we use service design blueprint in the IBM Garage project. We combine the service design blueprint with the output of a value orchestration workshop. So in a value orchestration workshop, we use value tree mapping exercise to map the strategic outcomes, the business benefits, and the key metrics for the client. Map that, and then we take those output and then map it on the service design blueprint. So the client and everyone, the stakeholders, everyone in the team, not just the client, everyone in the team can actually see what success really means, where the success related to each of the different customer experience or technology touch points on the roadmap. So this is how, again, combining frameworks, combining your facilitation skills, bringing your stakeholder on board. That is how we create the conditions when everyone can see what success, what design value really means. And then last but not least is our role and responsibility as a designer. We are no longer just a player. We are the coach. We are the middle person standing in between. We're the facilitator in between, balancing a few things. The tactics. We're the coach balancing the tactics, influencing the different outcomes, different variables, sorry, not outcomes, influencing different variables, and then, of course, influencing the outcomes. So standing in between all of this is important. We need to recognize that is increasingly our role as designers, because that is our way to create conditions for cross-functional teams to strive together. Because when we stand right in the middle of all these three things, we are able to use tactics, use strategy to orchestrate, to influence business direction. When we design the conditions, when we design how to manage these different variables, we provide governance of design values in a consistent manner for a project as well. And then, of course, when we embrace facilitation as our way to orchestrate value, we can actually influence the outcome by managing and facilitating the creation and the management of a value-based backlog for a project. So all in all, in order for us to manage, to navigate these intangible variables that is very often uncontrollable, out of your control, people, process, and systems, we need to embrace a certain few things before we can actually design the conditions for to achieve an intangible outcome. And these few things I hopefully in this checklist provide you something useful to follow through. First, on strategic level, embrace the use of frameworks, and bring people along. Apply a new, embrace a new way of working. Unite the front to work with the rest of your stakeholders, your team, so that you can create rituals to bring everyone along to understand the value of design, especially if you embrace in the articulation and use of numbers. And then, of course, facilitation as your superpower is the how can we navigate these different variables. And as a middle person, as a facilitator, we stand in the middle of navigating and using tactics, navigating these variables in order to achieve our outcomes. So hopefully this will help you to combat the complexity and the lack of clarity that always bubble up from these intangible variables, because all this complexity and lack of clarity is just going to create a lot of noise, right? So in order to navigate these noise, this little framework for you, hopefully to help you to give a bit more clarity. And to help you to remember this, remember now that you have tuned into the Fun FM frequency, so that hopefully this frequency this channel help you to navigate the noise of intangible and uncontrollable variables. That would be our way to design conditions for achieving an intangible outcome. So that's my sharing today. By no means this is the definitive end of what conditions design is all about. So I would love to engage with more conversations with all of you. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, which most of the time that's where I am at, by searching for Michael Tam. I'm also reachable on Twitter. And then of course, if any one of you are at different stage of your career, would love to more in-depth conversation, or if you're up-and-coming design leaders, hope to get a bit of advice or mentoring as a mentor as you're bouncing board of your ideas, of your thoughts. Feel free to reach out to me on ADP list as well. So that's it for me. I look forward to jump onto the social lounge to have a chat with you, and enjoy the rest of UX Design Conference.